Thank you for taking the time in what are very busy days to come together. We've had some really interesting online discussions in our Blether, Headspace and international sessions, and we're hoping you'll enjoy our work together today. This is the first in a series of systems thinking seminars, which are recorded and available to you with supporting resources for you to use either on your own or with groups of staff and colleagues. These seminars, as you will see, connect the work of some of our international guests and allows you some deeper reflection of their work and what the implications may be for you as school and systems leaders. I'm hoping that today we can stretch our thinking a bit into how our leadership impacts on our varied learning communities and takes us forward through and out of these uncertain and challenging times, and how our leadership through this experience determines what we learn from it, how we understand the new horizons that have opened up, and see what can be the new ways of learning and teaching, what are the new ways of working together, and how are we finding new ways to structure our organisations. To do that, we're going to take a look at and showcase some of Dr. Simon Breakspeare's work. Simon is one of the members of the Ontario Principal Council's Board of Advisors and is based in New South Wales, Australia, and he'll be our guest speaker for an international breakfast on the 25th of November. He's recently provided a webinar for International School Leadership Associates, and as an associate trainer, I was privileged to be able to take part. Over these few slides, we'll take a look at some of his thinking around this crisis and consider how we can prepare for a way out of it by reflecting on some of his ideas. All over the world, due to the global nature of this particular crisis, we've been seeing people determinedly making and sustaining connections, volunteering to help, fundraise and support each other. It's helpful to consider how a crisis throws us into chaos initially, but as we go deeper into any crisis situation, we see that a crisis also reveals things, just like the tide going out on a beach, and allows us to see what's under the surface. A crisis reveals up incredible acts of human connection and actions for others by showing deeply human responses. The optimist in me likes to think about the positive in any situation, and I suppose I've found a few silver linings during this time. I've been forced into long overdue learning about IT and taking lovely early morning walks in our beautiful countryside instead of my early morning commute on often frustrating journeys on ScotRail. What may be the silver linings for you that have been fulfilling? Perhaps you could quickly type some of your silver linings into the chat pane. Of course, this is a disruptive time too. We've become used to working from home and connecting virtually, and now being back in school is no less challenging. We know all of the changes people have been facing, but also a crisis can reveal surprising things. What have you seen that you may never have imagined happening in your school, your local authority, or in your regional collaborative? We're getting a real sense of what's underneath our surface working and our connections. And these are our values, our culture, how we build capabilities, and how we connect. We often talk about a culture of learning in our schools, but in this time of uncertainty is when we have seen that culture of collaboration and learning in action. We see and have strong evidence of the values of equity and social justice coming front and centre, ensuring that our most vulnerable children, young people and families have what they need. As we start to look at and think about this slide, I'd like to highlight a quote I saw recently while we were still in lockdown. School leaders are like actors in a play where the story, the script and costumes have all changed mid-performance, and they're on stage improvising to adjust to their new role. And that's by Azad Uman, the founder of the Global School Leaders. For me, it sums up the agility that school leaders were and are having to display. When we're in any crisis situation, I suppose we really have to be agile in all of our approaches, focusing on the essential, prioritising, putting actions in place, working in a very rapidly changing environment. And so it's important to be constantly seeking feedback, trying things out, refining and refreshing our approaches. Simon Breakspear talks about our response in these times as being possibly worked through in our organisations, schools and systems in 3 phases. Here at the beginning, it's important to be resilient, to keep people safe and connected, to address the immediate challenges of keeping children, young people and families in a place where they can learn and support learning, and that we lead with our values and purpose to ensure that equity is at the forefront of our thinking and planning. During lockdown, it was so uplifting to see the tremendous job and hear about the amazing work and unstinting energy that school and system leaders working alongside teachers put into this space to ensure the very best possible opportunities for all of our children and young people. However, in addition to this, head teachers were able to support and encourage and care for their staff and their communities. Staff who in many ways were having to upskill and learn how to do pandemic learning while coping with huge and wildly diverse challenges in their own lives. After that first crisis, many will have moved on through and now be stabilised and be in the adaptation phase, where resourcefulness is the underlying feature. Although as the numbers of infections changes, different challenges and restrictions come into force, and schools are in full operation, many are feeling as if they are regularly moving in and out of uncertainty. This reminds us that as we settle into the adaptation phase, we need to be careful. It's possible we could fall back easily into crisis again, or have colleagues who are there and need our support. There will undoubtedly be people who will at times feel overwhelmed and just holding it together day by day, some just surviving, learning as they go, and some becoming the lead innovators. As we begin to stabilise, schools start to think, now we can really move forward. When you think of the pace of change over the last few months, it's been incredible. It makes you wonder how many years of school improvement planning it would take to get everybody on board for this level of upskilling and digital learning normally. But so much of our focus has been on the learning for children and young people. However, it's also important to look at the learning of the adults. The learning people have done has been just fantastic, and we've seen adults in the system learning and changing significantly. It's been amazing to see the levels of collaboration and solution finding in teams. People are adapting to working so differently. It's also interesting to look at leadership in our organisations and see who is emerging and stepping up in their leadership with confidence. There's been an absolute transformation through this period, and it's critical that we don't lose sight of the implications of this, moving through recovery and beyond, as these skills and the confidence of the adults are what will take us forward from pandemic learning to the true virtual learning, which may well be a larger part of our new ways of working as we are re-establishing this full return to school with blended learning models running alongside. For now, some people will feel that they're in the transition of adaptation to opportunity phases, but many others will be in the adaptation phase, looking at the continuity of learning through the winter, through the early phases of the recovery from August and the reality of a very different school year. Learning the lessons from each period in time and reflecting on how to refine and improve into the next new stages will be critical. As leaders, we do need to start to think about what that opportunity phase and beyond might look like as we move forwards into a new normal. John Hattie recently has been urging schools just to get through the first 4 months of the new school year, but he recommends at the same time note down over those months anything which works particularly well or changes which have had significant success for young people. This will allow evidence reflection when we are ready to implement the forward planning of change. And so we must systematically learn from the innovations we've seen. These have not been without a cost. People are exhausted from working so differently while coping with so many different pressures. But it's important we don't lose the advantages we've gained going back to the old norms. Is that really an option? I'm not sure at all. We've changed so much in so many ways, that we really need to stop and reflect and think about how we embed the new learning into our school systems, into our wider systems, to ensure that all learners can continue to have their needs met. And also, we need to think that for some young people, they have actually preferred aspects of the remote learning work. How do we take account of that? For school leaders, it's important to recognise that you will most likely reach that point before your teams. And so you may need to stop and think about the leadership behaviours and actions to lead your learning communities into their new normal. At this point, Simon talks about a couple of practical things that school leadership teams could think about to support this learning and planning, moving from adaptation to opportunity. He suggests doing what he calls a pivot plan, a short-term, up to 50 days dynamic plan. And it's digitally planned, as that provides you with a documented record of plans and actions and outcomes, a note of what works and why, what doesn't work and why, for reflective learning. Simon's recommendation here is for Trello. I'm sure you'll have your own favourite system or app. His point is to keep a dynamic, digital, documented plan. He also talks about the benefits of a kind of ritual that becomes an embedded habit, like a Scrum type meeting. Short, sharp, and focused to allow shared problem solving, either in person or online, but crucially around the current action plan. He also recommends that you keep a pulse check on your teams, and I'm sure that's something you're doing on a daily basis. But also, like Hattie, that most importantly, you document everything as you go for future reflective learning. So now we've been through a bit of the what and the so what. But how about the now what? So on this final slide, this is a representation of a Y chart. And you can use this Y chart in different ways. You could use it with a small group of staff, face-to-face, working through what they're finding about leading in their own ways. Or you could use it online and use breakout rooms to cover these questions off. But it sets up some good discussions in your teams about what's important, where we are, and what are we going to do next? What are the key challenges? How can we move forward? So I hope you'll find this seminar helpful. In the notes, you'll find an explanation of the Y chart protocol and how you might use it. And there will be the recording available for you to use as you wish. Thank you very much for joining us today.